spirit world around us Facebook site. We are live streaming on this site. Of course, I am Brian Foster of nwspiritism.com. You can find a link to all my books, my articles, my YouTube channel, my BitChute channel on nwspiritism.com. I encourage all of you to share this video with other Facebook pages and with other YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube or on BitChute. And please like the video if you can, and share the video on YouTube or BitChute. It will help us spread the words of Spiritism. So what are we talking about tonight? We're talking about the Perispirit. And of course, we're talking about the Perispirit as talked about and written about by Leon Denis. Now, Leon Denis was born in 1846. Allan Kardec wrote this, or codified, I should say, the Spirits book in the 1850s. So Leon Denis was very young when Spiritism first started, but he was about, I think, 24 when Allan Kardec died, and he was called one of the apostles of Allan Kardec because he went to different Spiritist conventions, and he talked to groups. He was French. He actually worked around the nation of France. I think he was a salesman. So he worked very hard. He wrote many books. He died in 1924. And he actually was very important in helping organize Yvonne Pereira in writing her book. But he was in the spirit world, writing her book from her communications with the spirit, Camilo Branco, help her organize all the chapters and everything. It was just like a great book, The Memoirs of a Suicide, which I would recommend to everybody. So let's talk about today. Let's talk about the Perispirit and how it was interpreted by Leon Denis. So let's bring this up. Bring this up this way. So the Perispirit. Of course, this is in Portuguese here, but this is the spirit, which is a logical group of our personality, right? That is, the spirit is us, right? And when we are in the spirit world, we make our outside body, hair, face, whatever, clothes look as the way our thoughts do. So you have to think of us as personalities. In the spirit world uses this a lot. They call us a personality. That's all our intelligence, our ego, our id, our conscience, everything is in that logical grouping as we go through this immense energy and multi-layers of data and information in the spirit world, where there are multi-dimensions and multi-universes. So that's where we are when we cast off our body. Our Perispirit covers our whole body and is connected to almost what they say, every cell of the body. And then, of course, our body, which is in Portuguese up here on the screen, is corpo, which are, so that's our body. So now let's get to what Leon Denis said about this. So I'll keep this up here. So this is what he wrote. In denying the soul's existence, materialists have often argued the difficulty of conceiving of a formless being. The spiritualists themselves could not well understand how an immaterial and imponderable soul could be closely united to and command a material body whose nature was essentially different. These difficulties have been solved by the discoveries of Spiritism. As we have already stated, the soul during the life of the flesh, as well as after its death, is ever encased in a fluidic envelope, which is more or less subtle and ethereal, and which Allan Kardec has denominated the Perispirit, our spiritual body. The Perispirit acts as a mediator between the body and the soul. To the latter, it imparts the impressions received by the senses, while to the body it transmits the will of the spirit. At the moment of death, it detaches itself from tangible matter, which is our body, abandoning the body to the decomposition of the grave. But being inseparable from the soul, it ever remains the exterior forms of its individuality. The Perispirit is, therefore, a fluidic organism, the pre-existing and survival form of the human being, the general mold upon which the fleshy covering is laid, like an invisible double vestment made of a quintessential matter that penetrates into all bodies, however impenetrable they may appear to us. Gross matter, which must be incessantly renewed by the vital circulation, is neither the stable nor is the permanent part of man. It is the perispirit which assures the maintenance of the human structure and of the physiogenomic features. And this, during the whole term of life, from man's birth to his death, is the compressible and expansive mold upon which the earthly matter is incorporated. So I'd like to add a little bit to what he's talking about. So when you think about, Spiritism tells us that when we sleep, we can leave our body and go to the spirit world, our spirit. And there's been said, and even people on NDEs, and also has been recorded in books by Andre Luis, Chico Xavier psychographed his series of books. But when that spirit leaves the body, you still see the silver cord connected. And that is always connected to the body, because your spirit is commanding, via the perispirit, is commanding that body. In fact, I've even heard other people, spiritists, who have done astral planing, and they notice this silver cord still attached. And also people with NDEs, they've noticed a silver cord still attached to their body. Well, that cord is very important, because that is the perispirit covering the body. And that cord does not detach itself until the time that was predestined for you, for your soul to leave your physical body. That is why, which is so horrible to contemplate. But people who are either suicides or unconscious suicide, and an unconscious suicide is a person that like either drank themselves to death, used drugs, etc., that type of suicide where you did not take care of your body. That's why you will be attached to your body until that you were supposed to die. So if it can be very bad, because these people will see their body decomposing because they're still attached to their body. That's why suicide is not a great idea at all. Please let no one say there's no escape. You are an immortal spirit. There's never an escape. But also another reason is, so when we dream, let's get back to when we dream. The spirit has this, is connected to the spirit, which is connected to the body, which covers and puts information from the spirit into our brain. We don't know everything, right? We don't know our past lives. We don't know all the data that's available to our spirit, because that tunnel only contains so much, and our brain is only so powerful. That is why there's so much things we don't know. And that's why when we dream in symbols, or we see numbers. A lot of our dreams, we really don't understand what's going on. That's why I tell people I've had my BitSuit videos and my YouTube videos where I talk about how to analyze your dream. So a lot of times when you analyze, you just see how you feel. Do you feel good? It means you had a good experience. Or do you feel bad? It means you may have been in the umbral or below. So, but it's hard for us. It's a lot like Socrates talked. Actually, Plato wrote what Socrates said. About the allegory of the cave, right, where you had these people who all they could see was shadows on the wall from a flame behind them, and they were chained. They could just see in 2D, or we can see in 3D, right? Height, length, and width. But in the spirit world, it's 4, right, or even more. I mean, depends on how high you are. But you can see time. You can see the effects of time, and then you can read people's thoughts. There's so much more you can do. So it's like us trying to understand how all this looks, and our mind can't really handle it. I read an interesting thing when they were talking about when the Columbus ships came to the New World, and the Indians looked out across the ocean, and we said, well, they saw ships. Well, no, did they? They may have thought they were just low clouds. They had never seen ships that huge, right? To them, they're huge. To us, they're small. But did they really see ships, or did they think, is that a big animal, or is that a weird cloud? They didn't understand what they saw. The same thing with us as we're in the spirit world. We may not understand what we see, and therefore things are jumbled in our mind. That's why so many of our dreams are confusing to us. So, but the important thing to remember is your perispirit really is connected to everything. And when you violate your conscience, that what you're doing is you're creating stress and you're creating the electrical impulses in your perispirit, which is connected to everything, and also through your nervous system, right? It's part of the connection. But that's even, it embeds itself within the nervous system. It controls our body not as well as it should. And let me show you. And of course, it controls the different areas. Let me show you what areas we are talking about, because those are also known as chakras, or as in Spiritism, we talk about. Oh, I don't have them up here, so we'll do that later. I'll put this back up because that's a good diagram. So let's go on with what. Yes, and then one person says it's taken from the universal fluids and holds all memories of past lives. So, yes. So there's also something said about the perispirit. It was talked about in one of Devoldo Franco's book. I think it's by Neil Luso's The Planetary in Transition. It's been translated in English. I recommend that book to everybody. They also said the perispirit also knows every language we've ever learned. And there was this part of a chapter in the book where this spirit, who was an American, was talking to other spirits, and then another spirit who was actually Portuguese of origin said, well, how did you talk to them? He goes, well, I had known that language. I think it was Tagalog, or I forgot what language he was speaking to him. He goes, I had known that language in a previous life, and therefore I could speak to them, because the perispirit is the kind of the universal translator into anything. Whatever language we ever spoke, we can understand it because it comes through us, through our spirit bodies, through the perispirit, and right into our thoughts, and we understand it. And also, I was giving out images to people with my thoughts. So yes, so you have memory of past lives. Now, I'd like to make sure people understand is that when you leave the physical world to the spirit world, you may not be allowed until you are ready to know all of your past lives. So that will come with time. So not everyone is allowed to all of a sudden, just like as soon as you die, you know everything. No, you have to recover, and you have to show yourself you're spiritually mature enough to be able to understand and cope with what you've done in your previous lives. Because I've learned things that are just horribly embarrassing, where I've tortured people and done horrible things in past lives, which, if I wasn't a spirit just now, in another life and I died, I was like, oh my God, did I do that? So just want to make sure that people understand that part. So let's go back to what Leon Denis said, because I really want to get his take on things. So he said, this fluidic body is not, however, immutable. It is uplifted and purified by the spirit. He's talking about the spirit, the perispirit. It follows the soul through its innumerable incarnations. With it, it ascends the rungs of the hierarchical ladder, becoming ever more diaphanous and brilliant, at last to shine with that dazzling brightness of what the scriptures tell us, and which history has sometimes recorded. The perispirit preserves all that the living being has acquired. So it's just what was just said. Oh, and Facebook says hello. It's not giving me, I'm sorry for the people writing comments. It just says Facebook user, so it's not giving me the names of the person. So I don't know. The software I'm using sometimes, I guess, is not working as far as the name. So please put your name on there, so on the comments. So otherwise, this doesn't seem to be working very well. I apologize for that. So, and so a lot of that, and what they tell us when they says it shines with all the fervor, what they tell us is that as spirits ascend the spiritual ladder, they become more mature, and as you ascend the spiritual ladder, you actually reflect the love of God, and that reflection is the brightness. Oh, there's Jacob. Okay, yes. Thank you, Jacob. I want to make sure I had that right. And that's why you shine. And that's why when people have NDEs, they'll have an NDE and they'll see someone they know and they'll be able to see him almost as a normal person. But then maybe this other, what they'll say, well, I saw an angel and I could just barely make out their form. That's really just a higher spirit. It's someone who is just like me and you, but is more mature and learned, has done more work. And that's why it's so bright, because you can't, the love of all the environment and within the spirit realm shines off and reflects. And that's why it's hard to see them. So, so he goes on, it is in the brain of the spiritualized body that knowledge is stored and imprinted in phosphorescent lines. And it is after this plan that at reincarnation, the child's head is shaped and modeled. Thus, the spirit's intellectual capital, far from being lost, is accumulated and increases with each of its lives. This accounts for the extraordinary aptitudes that some gifted and precocious beings display at an early age. And yes, so why do we have musical geniuses like Mozart who could play, the piano upside down? And, it's just, this is because they are preloaded with some wonderful talents and gifts. It's just, amazing. He goes on to say, high thinking, pure living, a constant striving after the noble and the good, a patient endurance of trials and suffering. All these things tend to refine the perispirit and to extend and multiply its vibrations, as if by chemical action. The grosser particles are thereby consumed, and only the more tenuously subtle are suffered to endure. So as we go through life and we improve ourselves in life, we can actually improve our perispirit. So what does that mean to us? That means in our next life, our physical body can more closely resemble what we want it to be, right? We can actually control more and more of, given the basic foundations of genetic material from our mother and father. But we can more control what we look like, our capabilities, of course, with help of spirits. As I said before, people like physicians or surgeons will actually be, some of their DNA will actually be modified by that embryos in the womb to give it, more coordination so they can do very delicate surgery. So, then he goes on to say, inversely, material appetites and all the low and base cravings react upon the perispirit, weighing it down and rendering it denser and darker. So he says darker, right? Inferior worlds, such as the earth, exert a strong attraction upon such organisms as they still partially preserve some of the cravings of the body, which they are unable to satisfy. When this is the case, incarnations follow one upon another in rapid succession until the immolation wrought by the suffering has diminished their desires, freeing them from the earthly influences and giving them access to better regions. And again, you'll read this in books by spiritist mediums, where people who were alcoholics or drug users in their physical life, they die and they still have that craving. And then they will be drawn to other spirits. They'll be drawn to the other spirits who are, let's say an alcoholic spirit dies. He'll be drawn to other alcoholics. And then he'll almost obsess that spirit, because he'll want to feel the effects of alcohol by being next to that physical person. This is why sometimes it's so hard for addicts to quit, because they may want to quit, but then they have other spirits around them saying, no, you want that drink or you want that drug, because those spirits around them will also want to feel through, their proximity. They want to feel the effects of that drug. That's why it's extremely hard for an addict to quit in many, many cases. So Leon Denis, he's given us a lot of good information. He goes on, a close correlation unites three constituent elements of the being, proportionally to the elevation of the spirit. The perispirit becomes subtle, light, and brilliant. The more exempt is the body from passion, the more marked are its moderation and asceticism. The soul's dignity and nobility are reflected in the perispirit, which becomes ethereal and assumes a more harmonious contour. It is even noticeable in the body, and the human countenance is illuminated by an inner radiance. So this I had not read before, and this is something where I think, and we've seen it by people. We've seen it by people who are truly good, and they have a glow to their skin. Like people wrote about Socrates when he was very old. They said, but he was beautiful, right? He radiated something, not that a radiation that you could see, but it was a radiation you could feel. And the people who are really kind, even if to the standards of Earth they are very normal looking, or even maybe ugly. I mean, whatever people think, but still, there's just something inside that's just beautiful. And I think people have ever noticed it with people that met who may not, when you look at them from far away, they're not to our prejudices here on Earth. They look just normal or average or whatever. But then when they start talking or you get next to them, you feel something, right? You feel this dignity and this harmony. And that's why it's so important that we, for our own bodies and for our own souls, I should say, our own spirits, it's so important for us to improve ourselves in one life into the next. Because as I talk about when I've been doing my Sunday night programs on Cardiac Radio, I've been talking about reincarnation. And if you really want to make your next life well, study and do well in this life, because your next life your curriculum for your next life is being written as you live this life. And as Leon Denis is telling us, a lot of what comes in there affects the perispirit. And the perispirit, as you become better, the perispirit shines and becomes better and more powerful. And it also stops you from having these, primitive desires in your next life, which I would hope that would help me too, because I've had desire for wealth and power, and I'm hoping that I can help get relieve some of this and be a better person. So he goes on to say, it is by more or less subtle fluids that the perispirit communicates with the soul and connects itself to the body. These fluids, though invisible, are powerful cables which connect the perispirit to matter. Their action is exerted from birth till death, and even in the case of sensual organisms, until completely this dissolution has taken place. The final agony represents the sum of effort required by the perispirit to emerge from its carnal bonds. The nervous or vital fluid, of which the perispirit is the fountainhead, plays a considerable part in man's economy. Its existence and mode of action may supply the key to many a pathological problem. Acting as a transmitting agent, both for the external sensations and for current impressions, it resembles this in the telegraphic wire, which is a thought transmitter with a double current. So what he's telling us is the perispirit will influence us. And I actually am creating a short little video on that I haven't published yet, but talking about Freud. And Freud, of course, just very quickly says a lot of our problems are based upon our childhood. Now, the spirit world, when the spirit write about Freud, and say, well, a lot of things he says is correct, but he really didn't go back far enough. A lot of our obsessions, a lot of what we think, a lot of things that are instincts and stuff like that are really created by past lives. Maybe a fear of water, you drowned in a past life. Maybe, a child is born and they just absolutely, hate their father and love their mother. Well, that child may have been a lover who was maybe killed by the father of his mother, right? I've read these things, and they put that child into that set of parents to facilitate everyone being reconciled, right? Because the spirit world does not like unreconciled dramas between people. Again, this is why Jesus said forgive 77 times. is because the spirit world is not going to let you away from these set of actors in the plays, in the scenes of your previous life, until all this anger and thirst for revenge is done with, right? Because they're, if you do something terrible to someone, you'll be followed in life after life. Could be if that person is not a mature spirit and wants revenge against you. Somehow you will be born back together and things hopefully will resolve themselves. It may take more than one life. So these things are always important. And Leon Denis is telling us a lot of information. So he has said, and I'll repeat again, is the existence and mode of action may supply the key to many pathological problems. That's important to remember. So that's why when you have problems, now I'm not saying don't go to a psychiatrist and don't take your medicine, whatever. I won't say that, but I'm saying think about what it is, right? And I've actually written a book about problems you have that could be caused by past lives. It's called The Problem is the Solution. And you can find that on my website, NW Spiritism. Also, just as a reminder before I forget, my book, 7 Tenets of Spiritism, which is more of my own story of how I found Spiritism, how I find the signs and signals of Spiritism. I have now put that into an audio book. Put this up real quick so you can see it. Here's the 7 Tenets of Spiritism. So that is now an audio book. You can find, of course, that book in Kindle or paperback and now in audio. So that's my first audio book. So I'd recommend everyone, if you're into audiobooks, please look at that. So let's go back here to our Spiritism. So Leon Denis goes on. It says, acting as a transmitting agent, both for external sensations and for inner impressions, it resembles in this the telegraphic wire, which is the thought transmitter with a double current. Of course, now think of the time when Leon Denis was writing this, was in before the phone was out, right, for mobile phones. So it's really, when he's saying it's a thought transmitter, so yes, he's right, it's a thought transmitter, and you have to really look at it. It's really it reads the radiation. It's more like an X-ray or one of these imaging systems that sees everything, and it touches everything. It from what I've read in spirit books, is it to the molecule level, to the cellular level, that your perispirit controls everything. This is why when you go against your conscience, I'll repeat this again, you go against your conscience and you try and tell yourself, no, it's okay if I do this, even though I know it's wrong. Yes, and someone said, yeah, to learn how to love, that's the important thing, is that creates disharmony, and your perispirit, which controls different areas of your body, will then have a harder time because of the disharmony, and your stress have a harder time in controlling your body that way. And that's why there's been studies that people who are spiritual and religious have better health. There's a reason. So that's why studying Spiritism and studying why you're here and how you should be is so important. Now, he goes on to say, the existence of the perispirit was known to the ancients. Okama Inferior, so the Greek and Oriental philosophers designated the sheath of the soul, lucid, ethereal, and aromial. According to the Persians, when the hour of incarnation has sounded, the Fourier, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, attracts and it condenses about such material molecules as are necessary to form a body. Then at death, it gives them back to the elements and other surroundings, gathers the materials for other carnal envelopes. Christianity likewise shows indication in this belief. In the first epistle to the Corinthians, St. Paul says, it is sown a natural body. It is raised by a spiritual body. And again, as there is a natural body, so there is a spiritual body. Now, there is a great description of the moment of conception when the soul enters the body. And what it was in one of Andre Luis's books, and they talked about there was the mother and father were together, and then all the spirits said, "Okay, we'll leave the room. Let them get to let them get to their business." Right? They were making love, and then they came back a couple hours later. They were, the husband and wife were sleeping, and then they could see the sperm was just it got into the egg, right, to create conception, and they saw a flash of light, right, when that conception occurs. And in fact, it's very interesting now. I was just reading somewhere where when that happens, the scientists actually see like this flash of light, electrical energy. He says then the soul of the person being incarnated kind of puts them around the mother like a mollusk, right? And then it shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, and it shrinks into that embryo, into that embryo, which is like a cell practically, sinks into that embryo, and again, and then of course, so life begins right at conception. So at least that's what Spiritism says, and that's why, although people have their free will, that's why it's so important for us to understand that life does begin at conception. And again, here, this is what Leon Denis just said. So then he goes on to say, although the fact of its existence of the perispirit has at sundry epochs has been maintained, it was left to Spiritism to determine the precise nature and parts. Thanks to the experiments of Crookes and others, we now know that it is through the perispirit that the phenomenon of magnetism and spiritism are accomplished. The spiritual body is a veritable reservoir of fluids that the soul sets in motion by the will. The same perispirit during sleep, whether natural or artificial, frees itself from the body and travels over great spaces with the power to hear and to observe in the darkness of night as well as in the brightness of day, many things of which the body could not of itself be cognizant. Thus it is evident that the perispirit possesses senses which are akin to those of the body, only far superior. It sees by a spiritual light unlike that of the stars, one which is imperceptible to the human vision, although the universe is filled with it. Of course, that's what other spirits tell us too, and that's what I've talked about in sight, the sight and hearing of a spirit, is that the spirit doesn't see with its eyes, but it sees with its whole body and hears. And of course, it can hear and see things. It was said in one of the books by Andre Luis that we can only see about 1/8 of what is around us. And in fact, there was this great book, and it's in my book, The Spirit World Talks to Us, and it was about the death of this poor girl called Daisy. And as she was dying, she says, "I can see everything. I can see the spirit world. And she was in this room, but I can see the nature outside. They started giving her the sight and senses of a true spirit. And she could just see other spirits walking around. She could talk to other spirits. And she told all this to her parents. It was in this great book, and a very short book. And I wrote about it in my book, The Spirit World Talks to Us. It was about 12 NDEs. And she was talking to spirits and got information which she had no knowledge before of, where her parents lived before she was born, and, a neighbor who had lost a daughter or a son, all these things that she had no clue on. So it just, again, this was written about, I think, around in the 1870s, 1860s. So this information has been out there. Again, this is why it's so important for each one of us to understand, and for ourselves, why we believe in the spirit world, why we believe in God. Because in our culture today, of course, in our material culture, believing in something else besides just what we can see materially is considered, ignorant. Well, it's not. It's what is only ignorant is for you not to look beyond. Because look, even as any scientist will tell you, there's so much we don't know. And we're always learning. And that's why for each one of us needs to for ourselves, maybe your aunt or uncle had this vision or something like that, where you thought, well, how did they know that? Or you had something, or just have you read about NDEs? How could these people know these things, right? There's so much more that we don't know. So just keep an open mind is all I want to say. You're Of course, you have free will to believe what you have. And I also want to make sure everybody understands, if you're a nice person, you're a good person, you're full of love, it doesn't make a difference if you believe in Spiritism or if you don't even believe in God. You will still be in one of the regions of heaven. All that Jesus and the Spirit world wants is for you to remove your primitive emotions and replace them with noble emotions, right? Advanced emotions, love, charity, and fraternity. So, me carry on with what he was saying. In the free life of space between you and the spirit, the perispirit is in virtual possession of all the forces that appertain to the human organism, but it does not utilize them. As soon as the spirit is placed in necessary conditions, that is, so soon as it can borrow from the medium the needful fluidic matter and vital force, it assimilates these and slowly assumes the outward appearance of earthly matter. The vital current begins to circulate, and under the action of the borrowed fluid, the physical molecules group themselves according to the laws of the body, laws reproduced by the perispirit in all its essential features. Thus is the human body reconstituted in the organism fitted to fulfill its functions. So, this is why Spiritism is so interesting. It tells you all these vital information of what it's for. And there's also been in the book Liberation by Andre Louise, they also talked about spirits who have been in the abyss, and like a hell or type of purgatory. There's no permanent hell for so long that they've almost lost their perispirit. They've almost lost the ability to be reincarnated. And if they are to be reincarnated, what happens is they probably will come back as stillborn children or very disabled children, because they'll have to get that mold back into the human body so the perispirit can start reconstituting itself. So it's pretty sad for someone who's just completely obsessed or completely given over to bad thoughts, is something that you don't want to happen. So I want to encourage everybody. That is where we are. Where we are tonight. I want to encourage everybody to share this video. Go on my YouTube and BitChute channel, which you can go on nwspiritism.com, and click on the links and subscribe. Please share this video to other Facebook page. If you want to talk to me, and I've had quite a few people so far do that, or Sergio is also another person he actually created the spiritismstudy.org site. You can go to the spiritismstudy.org site, scroll down a little bit, and there's a place where you can get an appointment with myself or other people to actually discuss Spiritism. I love doing this. I love talking to people. This is nothing that you're going to have to read something. I give you assignments. No, none of that. We're just going to talk about it, talk about what you want to talk about, explore what you want to explore. I may suggest certain things to read. One person I gave a bunch of PDF books I had. So hopefully it won't cost anything. If you want to read something, I may have that. If not, that's up to you, however you want to get that information. So I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Remember, we are here on Spiritism and the spirit world around us. We are here every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, all time zones in between and around the world. And please, if you want, on my Facebook site, when this goes, give me comments. What would you like to hear next? Or ask questions. I can always go off tangents. But again, we'll carry on with more Leon Denis. But then after I do Leon Denis, then I'll start going in different NDEs and going in depth about one NDE for each Wednesday night, which I think people would find very fascinating. So again, I want to say God bless everybody and a good night. God bless.